The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Stanley Cup Finals are set. When are they starting? Tomorrow night? No, Saturday. NBA Finals have been set since last Thursday. When are they starting? Yeah, Thursday. I don't quite get this, but this is the way it works, and it won't be until at least the middle of the month, maybe late this month, that this will all be over with. The NBA Finals could go as late as the 23rd. The Stanley Cup Finals could go as late as the 24th. It just seems like we're rolling into summer, and these are winter sports, and you'd want to get them wrapped up as quickly as possible or keep the momentum at least going, but that's not the way they do it. So we'll see what kind of teams we get when they take the court in Boston on Thursday. I think there are going to be a couple of stale teams. And for the NHL, well, it's not the matchup that they were looking for. Dallas eliminated last night by Edmonton. So Edmonton goes on to the finals, and they will play the Florida Panthers. I think the league would have liked to have had the Rangers, the New York Influence. They don't have that, but that's the way it goes. We will get to that. Also, a couple of big stories. So one of them nationally, and who'd have thought that a women's basketball player in the WNBA would be leading the news coverage, but that is one of the hot stories in sports about the Caitlin Clark treatment. And also, the Commanders have cut Brandon McManus. The one thing that probably should not have been overlooked, if in fact there was some hint of it, while they were doing their background checks on him as a free agent, that has reared its ugly head, and he's now gone. They're looking for a kicker, and this is a bump in the road for a team that has cruised along by just not being Dan Snyder owned. You know, all the things that have happened in the last year plus have been beneficial for the fact that Snyder was not involved in them, and so the one thing, I mean, if you're looking at things that could possibly be a problem in signing a player, this was it, and we'll get to that and a whole lot more. But I did want to talk about my weekend. I was off on Friday, and I went up to New York to see my son and his fiance. They are going to be leaving the Big Apple late next month after living there for the last 7 years. And these are two suburban kids. My son's turning 33 this month, but two suburban adults. She grew up in the suburbs of Seattle. He grew up in the suburbs here in Rockville. And they were city dwellers for the last 7 years. I never got to do that in my life. I lived in Queens for a while, but for most of my life, I have been a suburbanite. That's how I grew up in Chevy Chase. That's how I raised my family. And I now live in the suburbs still, in a townhouse in Germantown. That's how I live my life. So I've looked at them with some envy as to the things that they have been able to do and how they've been able to do them. They have a dog, and there's a routine where you go to Central Park on Saturday and Sunday mornings, and just kind of the things that you do when you leave. Sure, it's a hassle and it's tough, and I don't think I'd want to live there necessarily at my age. But at their age, that's a really cool thing. So taking advantage of their final couple of months in the city, I thought I'd go up for a weekend. Turned out to be a gorgeous weather weekend, just absolutely fabulous. One of the things I like most in New York is walking around, just people watching, seeing the sights. And I did a lot of walking myself before I got to their apartment late Friday afternoon. And my son and I spent a lot of time walking around on Saturday and just seeing all the beautiful sights and the beautiful weather and all the stuff that goes along with Manhattan in the late spring, right? We're not quite in summertime yet. I think it's June 21st when we go to spring. And then we went to the Mets game on Saturday afternoon. And I had heard that they were going to retire Darryl Strawberry's number. But in talking to my son to arrange the weekend, I just looked at the schedule. I said, well, why don't we go to the Saturday afternoon games? I'm much better in the afternoon than I am at night. I don't like games that go so late because I get tired. So let's go to the 4 o'clock game on Saturday. This is great. You got tickets on StubHub. You got great seats. And we got there early, and we were seeing chairs being set up. There's Darryl Strawberry, not posters, but on the scoreboard, you see his name there. And they also took, that in center field, they had this in Shade too, but they have it now in Citi Field. It's a big apple that pops up when somebody hits a home run. And Darryl Strawberry is the Mets' all-time leader in homers, 252. So they painted the apple to look like a strawberry, put those little, like, I don't want to say pimples, but yeah, I guess that's the best way to describe them. So the apple looks like a strawberry, and they put his number 18, which was being retired on it, and they had, again, all the folding chairs set up around second base, and they had a podium, and Howie Rose has been a long-time play-by-play voice of the Mets, emceed the ceremony. And, we knew that he'd have family and friends there. There were a bunch of ex-teammates there. Keith Hernandez, who does the games on TV. Mookie Wilson was there. The widow of Gary Carter. There probably, at least a dozen teammates there, including, of course, Dwight Gooden. And they are linked in history as the greatest, maybe the greatest, what-if duo in the history of baseball. And I'll get to that in a second. And one of the things that we were wondering about for this retirement ceremony, we knew that, again, family members would be there, but DJ Strawberry, who played basketball at Maryland for 4 years, was a terrific player there, played briefly in the NBA and probably some years over in Europe. There's some bad blood between DJ and Darryl because of the recklessness in which Darryl lived his life. And they seemed to be estranged because when DJ started playing for Maryland, Darryl showed up at a couple of games early, and it was pretty clear that DJ didn't want him there. And we pretty much didn't see Darryl for the rest of his career in College Park. DJ, we did, and he had some big games and was part of some big wins in his time there as a player, and represented himself and his family incredibly well. And we wondered, was there still bad blood? But no, he was there, and he looked pretty much the same. He was wearing a number 18 jersey, gave his dad a hug, and then Darryl got up and spoke for quite a while, and was quite eloquent and humble. And said that the biggest mistake he ever made was leaving New York. The fans loved him there, and it was to me, as someone who came there in 1987 and had observed his career, including kind of the up and the down, the unbelievable start that he and Dwight Gooden had together in the mid '80s with the World Series in '86. But we found out stories much later on that cocaine had entered their lives in a big way, to the point where even Gooden missed the victory parade because he was in a crack house. That's how serious their problems were. And they never really fulfilled the promise that they showed early in their career, both individually and as a team, because of the various things that were going on behind the scenes. And it was having done sports radio there, he was the number one lightning rod in that city. In that period of time, when I was the first 4 years that I was working in New York, which were his last 4 years playing for the Mets, I don't think there was an athlete talked about more than Darryl Strawberry. First, the problems he's having off the field. Is he a good teammate? He supposedly called Wally Backman or Lenny Dykstra a little redneck. He was supposed to be at a game, and he was making a rap video. I mean, there were all kinds of things that were going on at that time. And for 2 years, is he going to re-sign? Is he going to go someplace else? Well, he winds up signing with the Dodgers. Doesn't work out there as well as it should have. Eventually, he's out of baseball, playing for like the St. Paul Saints, has this miraculous comeback playing for the Yankees, and finished up his career playing in New York. And it wasn't quite the same. He should have been a Met for his entire career. And as you look at the two of them, I mean, just taking a look at their 1985 seasons, the year before they won the World Series. First of all, Gooden as a rookie in '84, he was 19 years old. He was 17-9 with a 2.60 ERA, by far the runaway winner for the Rookie of the Year. He also finished in second in the Cy Young voting. The following year, he puts together at 20 one of the greatest seasons in the history of baseball. He was 24-4 with a 1.53 ERA, 268 strikeouts, won the Cy Young, finished fourth in the MVP voting. But he was out of baseball at the age of 30, released by the Mets. Nobody picked him up. He had a little bit of a comeback, and more than a little bit, because he pitched a no-hitter for the Yankees. But the rest of his career, even though he spent 16 years in baseball, the drugs ultimately led to his demise as a player. You had potentially one of the great pitchers in the history of the game and a player who was compared to Ted Williams, and neither one of them will get a sniff of the Hall of Fame. Both of them had their career tinged by drugs, and you just look at what they could have been. And look at that 85 season. Gooden at 20 goes 24-4. Strawberry at 23 hits 277 with 29 homers, 93 runs batted in. Missed a bunch of games. 87 and 88, he had 39 homers each year. I mean, he was on his way to being one of the greatest players in the history of New York in any sport, and one of the most talked about for sure. And just to see now, all these years later, the fans, showering him with love, and grateful for the World Series that he helped to deliver in 1986. That's the last one that they won. But also remembering that those two guys, and they did hug it out. Their hug was longer than the others that he had with ex-teammates. The two of them linked in history. They made 30s about it. I mean, it's an incredible story of two guys who could have had it all in the biggest baseball city in America, and it all got washed away because of drugs and alcohol and other personal problems. And each of them has battled health problems. Darryl, thanked his wife for taking him to the hospital like 4 or 5 months ago when he suffered a heart attack. I mean, I think at least one of them, I know for Strawberry for sure, and maybe Gooden as well, have battled cancer. I mean, it's just a remarkable story about the two of them. And to be there on that beautiful afternoon on Saturday and thinking back of what could have been. I mean, this was a number retirement that was worthy, the all-time home run hitter for the Mets, but also something that is unfulfilled promise, that, we should have been talking about him in the same way that we talk about Mickey Mantle or Joe DiMaggio. The greatest Met of all time is Tom Seaver. His story is also tinged with sadness, and that they traded him away at the peak of his career. I mean, he's one of the greatest pitchers in the history of the game, and just never had what he should have had. When you talk about guys who had full careers with the Mets, you're talking about Ed Kranepool. He's a good player, but it's just not the same. And so I looked at that as kind of a bittersweet afternoon, but just really happy to be there with my son and enjoying the sunshine. Game stunk. The Mets fell behind Arizona 10-1. They scored, I think, 4 runs in the 9th inning, made it 10-5. But it was not a good game, but just a great afternoon, and great to be a part of something that I remembered so well in history. All right, let me get to the Caitlin Clark situation. I'll get to the Brandon McManus story. In case you're not up to speed, this broke last night. Not a surprise that the Commanders have released him. There were reports last week that 2 women who were flight attendants on a flight to London that the Jaguars were on last year, McManus kicking for Jacksonville, were sexually assaulted by him, that he had been passing out $100 bills, and he'd been brought alcohol on the plane, which is against NFL rules, and that he was bumping and grinding against them. They've also sued the team. I mean, this is the one thing that they could not deal with. So we'll get to more on that. But I did watch, when I was back at my son's apartment on Saturday before we headed off to the game, the end of the Indiana Fever game. And they were playing in Chicago, and there was a clear, hard foul at least by Chennedy Carter, probably flagrant foul. It was initially issued an away from the ball foul, but later changed to a flagrant one. But more importantly, what's going on here is there seems to be unbelievable jealousy for Caitlin Clark, where they should realize that the reason that they're flying on private jets right now is because of Caitlin Clark. The amount of attention that she has brought to the WNBA is off the charts. The television ratings, although I haven't seen them, I got to imagine they're threefold better than they ever were, and it's because of her. But there's great jealousy because she came into the league having not done anything. She came armed with this enormous contract from Nike and all the commercials. And she's on a bad team and has had, didn't get any worse than last night. She had the worst game of her career. She was 1 for 10, 1 for 7 from 3 points in this game where the Liberty blew out the Fever at the Barclays Center, 104-68. Now, they have played 11 games in 19 days. I understand that the league wanted to get her off the ground and ride the momentum of the NCAA tournament and ride the momentum of 18 million people watching the games. But also, they've worn out a really bad team. I mean, you have to be a bad team to draft Caitlin Clark, which they were. They were the worst team in the league. And then you're having them play this gauntlet of a schedule with, and I don't think they counted on this, a bunch of players who can't stand her. And on this foul by Trinity Carter, she was seen mouthing the B word to Caitlin Clark. And, Clark has had to, she's not going to criticize anybody about this. And she understands that she's going to be, tested by the other players. But, this is the golden goose. The NHL players understood this 40-some years ago when Wayne Gretzky came in. He was good for business. They were going to make a lot more money because of this guy who had otherworldly talent. And they didn't hit him. And on top of that, he had enforcers. With this hit that Clark took from Kennedy, the teammates just stood around and watched. It's incredible. So this was Matt Barnes, social media yesterday, putting out this little statement. He's a guy who played 14 years in the NBA, played with the Clippers and the Lakers, the Kings, the Warriors, the Knicks. Been around, and he was a guy he wasn't an enforcer, but he was there to protect the stars. And he's saying to the WNBA players, hey, what are you guys doing?
Now, Caitlin Clark says she got cheap shotted against the sky. I mean, throughout the season, she's been getting beat up. Hard screens, elbows, knocked down. It is what it is. She's not the first. She won't be the last. My issue and my question is, where the fuck are her teammates at? Where y'all at? Where are the rest of the Indiana Fever at? I've seen a couple girls smirk when she's got knocked down, half-assed to pick her up. Like, y'all supposed to protect the asset, protect the star. And all this is the team. She's the star. You always protect your star. I was someone who protected the stars. You Kobe, CP, Blake, list goes on. It's going to be a problem because you guys are supposed to be a family. And you wonder why you sit at the bottom of the league right now is because y'all don't protect each other, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now, this is what Steve Serby of the New York Post wrote. He covered last night's game where the Fever got blown out by New York, and he said, Clark is being tested. She's being tested physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Some of it is petty jealousy. Some of it is by veteran players who choose not to be punked by a rookie. She's the face of the WNBA, whether they like it or not, and of course not everyone likes it. And of course there are those who get their dander up. The new face of the league happens to be a white face that is late to this WNBA party. To her credit, Clark has diffused any and all suggestions that race has played a role here. She's the one that signed the $28 million Nike contract before attempting her first three. She is the one in the State Farm commercial. She is a marked woman. But in the wake of Chicago guard Trinity Carter shoulder-banging Clark to the floor from the ball on Saturday in Indianapolis and seeming to mouth the B word and liking anti-Clark tweets and the persistent hammering that Clark has been subjected to, the league should do itself a favor and get tougher on any and all flagrant incidents and start cracking down on any would-be self-appointed vigilantes. The WNBA the league upgraded Carter's foul from a common foul to a flagrant one on Sunday morning. Better late than never. Yeah, so, don't kill the golden goose, ladies. This is good for business. And when you settle into your private jet, rather than schlepping onto a commercial flight that might be delayed or cramped or whatever else you've had to deal with over the years, you can thank this woman. And trying to, intimidate her out of the league is not going to be in your best interest, because if you chase her away, it's going to be maybe a long time, if ever, if anybody like Caitlin Clark comes along again. She has brought the casual fan into the game. That's what you need to make it work. Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it. You got it. You may have your petty jealousy. You may not like that she's not as good as you and she makes $28 million a year from Nike. Okay. But she's going to elevate everybody else. And, it'd be almost like if in golf you could play defense, there'd be guys knocking Tiger Woods around 25, 30 years ago. No, it doesn't work like that. Rising tide lifts all boats. Come on, leave her alone. Coming up, NBA, we were talking about what looks to be like the Clark rules for Caitlin Clark, that players are bumping her around. There's nobody to protect her. Reminds you of the Jordan rules that came about from the Detroit Pistons, the bad boy Pistons, when they won their, pretty much forgotten titles. We think of the Magic and Bird era, and we think of the Jordan era with the Bulls, and then the Kobe era with the Lakers and Shaq, but we don't really remember as well those bad boy Pistons. But they were a big factor in the league when the league was a lot different than it is right now. And John Salley played on those teams, and he now does a variety of broadcasting things, some podcasting, so forth. He was on the Dan Patrick Show on Friday, and we'll tell you something very interesting about that rivalry and his relationship with Jordan himself. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
This isn't just a happy morning for the family of Justin Jefferson and Jefferson himself agreeing to a 4-year, $140 million contract, $110 million guaranteed, the biggest non-quarterback contract in NFL history. If you're C.D. Lamb and his family, there's got to be a lot of high-fiving going on right now. He's up for a new contract, and if you look at the numbers, they're almost identical. Each of them have played 4 years in the NFL, Jefferson and Lamb. There have been 3 All-Pro seasons for Jefferson, 2 for Lamb, okay, but each has made 3 Pro Bowls. The catch numbers are actually a little higher by 3 for C.D. Lamb. He's got 395 career catches. Jefferson's got 392. Jefferson's got slightly more yards, about 700 more yards. But Jefferson has 4 fewer touchdowns. Whoa! These are the glory days for wide receivers. Man, you used to be able to kind of make those guys interchangeable. And when Terry McLaurin got his big contract, I'm not saying Terry McLaurin is at this level of Jefferson or Lamb, but he's pretty good. And I'm trying to think what the number was. I think it was like half of what Jefferson makes. It was like $16, $17 million a year, or maybe it's 18. But these are the days to be a wide receiver or a quarterback. If you're a running back, well, you take what you can get. John Salley, very good broadcaster and a guy who won championships with 3 different teams, was the first NBA player to win titles with 3 different teams. Known, I guess, best for his role with the bad boy Pistons of the late 80s, and a guy who has always had a good sense of humor and a good way of looking at things. And, if you've studied the history of the league and when it really, got to be on the front burner, the days of television when you had Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain playing against each other on national TV just about every Sunday through the basketball season, and the legendary battles that they had, usually won team-wise by Russell, but Wilt was a giant in many ways and was one of the great, if not the greatest, some would argue, the greatest player in the history of the game. What we found out later from their bitter rivalries when they played against each other, both when Wilt was in Philadelphia and Los Angeles, is that they were friends. And when Wilt would have his team at home against Boston, Russell would come to his house. They spent Thanksgiving dinner together. Who knew they were great friends? So when you had that bitter rivalry between the up-and-coming Bulls with young Michael Jordan and the bad boy Pistons of Isaiah and Lambeer and Vinnie Johnson, all those guys, guess what? This is what John Salley revealed when he was on the Dan Patrick Show on Friday talking about those days of the bad boy Pistons.
I would hang out with MJ. He would come into Detroit. I'd pick him up. We would go eat. In Chicago, he couldn't really do anything and hang. But I always been around money. I loved it. Still to this day, I love him to death. But, my teammates after my first season made sure, hey, if they're not wearing our colors, they're not our gang. And so it took me a second to learn it.
But did you catch heat from Isaiah or Lambeer or anybody else that you were hanging with Mike?
No, because I didn't let them know I was hanging with Mike. One time, right, my first Thanksgiving in the pros, right around that time, we're playing against the Hawk, and Kevin Willis comes in town. He's from the D. Everybody go over to his mama's house. I show up. I then drive them back to their hotel. They beat the living out of me the next day. And Bill Lambert says, they're not your friends anymore. We are. And I never forgot it. So I learned how to separate friendship and being a Viking. I learned how, or Raider, better put.
But if you look at the image, the persona, personality of the Bad Boys, was it more Isaiah or more Lane Beer?
Whew. It was these two together. I know it sounds crazy, but that's why they were our two captains. They led just like that. It was a well-oiled machine. We knew the hierarchy. We knew how it worked. We had these two generals, and then we had this really quiet secretary named Joe Dumars. And then we had this unbelievable sniper coming off the bench named Vinnie Johnson. And then we had our grunts. It was me. It was Dennis. It was Rick Mahorn. It was James Edwards. Mark Aguirre came in and was special units. I mean, we literally ran it like that.
But if you look back on the players that you played with or against, you got Isaiah.
Yeah.
Kobe.
Yeah.
Mike.
Yeah.
So if we're going to
Shaquille.
Okay, we're going to rank those. I'm going to give you the first pick in the draft. You can have Zeke, Mike, Shaq, Kobe. Anybody else you want to throw in there?
Yeah. So the first player I would draft would be out of North Carolina.
Okay.
The next person would be Isaiah Thomas. And then I would get Shaquille O'Neal. And then I would do what Jerry West did. And I would find this kid in high school who has the potential to be. And I'm telling you, Isaiah is the toughest guy, one of the toughest guys I ever played with. He's maybe 6'1", and he can do it all. And he had to. He's
underrated, John. I think
he's way underrated.
Yeah, I really
way
do.
Underrated.
Yeah, and I think his attitude.
The short end of the stick.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I think attitude, the way you guys played. Maybe it turned people off with embracing him, but he wasn't afraid of a big moment, whether it's with Bob Knight at Indiana or certainly with you guys.
It didn't turn people off in Detroit.
No, you guys love that. But elsewhere,
Right.
It's weird though. We embraced Michael around the league. You guys were never embraced around the league. We embraced Larry around the league. We embraced Magic around the league. Never embraced the Bad Boys.
You know why? Because the manuscript on it was Magic and Bird, and then all of a sudden, first it was, hey, how do we get out of this Dr. J situation? And they have Magic. And then it's Magic and Bird, and it's the Celtics versus the Lakers. Let's get that going. And then when they put the Messiah in Chicago, they thought it was going to be this guy handing off to this. He's going to be the next run. But as Mitch Albom, the great writer, put, this little team in the middle of the country, out of this city that no one was paying attention to, messed up the picture. So the picture at one time looked like Van Gogh. And then when we got there, it looked like Basquiat.
Yeah, nice art reference there. Just expanding on what Patrick asked about the Pistons and how they were viewed. Here's my feeling on why they weren't beloved. It was at the end of, I think, the best era in the history of the NBA, the Magic and Bird years of the 80s. It can't get much better than that. You had the perfect contrast there. The right player in the right city with Magic in Los Angeles, the right player in the right city with Bird in Boston, coming off their championship matchup in the NCAA tournament. I mean, it just doesn't get better than that. So whatever followed them was not going to be as attractive. And here's something else. Isaiah was never going to be beloved. One of the ways that he really hurt himself, and whether he was kidding or not, it didn't go over well. And when he said in the locker room as his Pistons were getting ready to take out Boston, remember they took the torch from them, so they won the Eastern Conference Finals in 1989 as that dynasty was coming to an end. He said if Larry Bird were black, he would just be another player. Bird let him off the hook. He didn't care what he said about that, but people took it in a way like, oh, that ungrateful little, and so they had that. Then you also had the big heel in Bill Laimbeer. Everybody hated him. Incredibly, Dennis Rodman was a good complimentary player. He had no tattoos. He didn't do any of the weird stuff. And, people just looked at him as a really good rebounder and a really good player. But the polarizing nature of Isaiah and the things that he said, and also the hated heel in Lambeer, that created a lot of image problems for them. They had Chuck Daly, who was a great coach, later coached the Dream Team, the 92 Olympic team. Remember, Krzyzewski was an assistant on that team. That was Chuck Daly's team. But I think there's a lot to that, and there have been documentaries done on the Bad Boy Pistons, and also the style that they play. They wouldn't get away with that today. Doesn't work that way. But the league was letting you be physical, and so they had the Jordan rules. And then Jordan bulked up. You know, one thing, when you challenge Michael Jordan, he's going to come back with a vengeance, and he did. And then when they toppled them, I think another reason that they're not looked upon well is that Isaiah led his team off the court without shaking hands with the Bulls. The Bulls were gracious when they lost to the Pistons. Pistons were not, led by Isaiah. So I think that all those things add up so that they are not a beloved team. But when you write the history of the NBA post Magic and Bird, I don't know how you write it without not putting them in the first paragraph. So they get overlooked in an unfortunate way, to I think, a large degree. All right, coming up in the next hour, some more NBA as the finals are now set. Tim Legler has his pick for that, and some interesting stuff from Greg Olsen, who is going to be demoted after winning his second straight Emmy. It's an odd dynamic in broadcasting, and we'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. You know, I think if Jerry Rice were playing today, he would just shake hands with Eddie DeBartolo and say, we're partners. The wide receiver money, oh my God, and it's gone nuts in this offseason. Whole bunch of receivers getting paid. CeeDee Lamb getting ready to get paid by the Dallas Cowboys, and the price just went way up as Justin Jefferson has agreed on a 4-year deal to stay in Minnesota. $140 million, $110 million guaranteed, $35 million a year. The highest non-quarterback salary in NFL history. Some of the names: Jalen Waddle got money, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Michael Pittman. These guys are getting paid, and these are great days to be a wide receiver for sure. And Terry McLaurin's really good. He's not at that level, but it looks like the Commanders a couple of years ago got a bargain on a guy who can be an outstanding receiver and can help a team that has aspirations of being a playoff team, maybe not this year. And they'll have to do it with a kicker that they weren't counting on, since Brandon McManus has been cut after the report surfaced last week that 2 flight attendants say they were sexually assaulted by him on a team flight when he was playing with Jacksonville last year. So the Commanders wasted no time, cut him loose. They've paid him half of his guaranteed money, which was $1.5 million. The question is the second half of that going to be paid on June 7th now that he's no longer on the team, and they'll take the cap hit and all that. It was a bad deal, and they messed up by not. I'm sure they did their due diligence, but by not finding out something like this for this team in particular is not good. Not a good situation. Tom Lovero's got something today in the Washington Times, which you may or may not be aware of, but I'm sure you're aware of Montana Senator Steve Daines, who is attempting to hold up what is, basically becomes a rubber stamp from the Senate on this bill that would change the lease for the RFK Stadium land, which it's federal land, but it would redo the lease for the District of Columbia so that it could be zoned for commercial. And the Congress said, fine. The Senate now, they have to approve it. And the way this works is that a single vote single senator can block this legislation, can block the vote from taking place. It's not that the vote has to be unanimous, but a senator can stop the vote from happening. That's the way it works. So I was not aware of this until today. It's someone I like, someone I voted for a bunch of times. Senator Chris Van Hollen, Livero writes, has quietly made it clear he wants the team to stay in his state. Van Hollen is backing Maryland Governor Wes Moore's efforts to keep the team in the state, with a new stadium to be built next to the existing one in Landover. That's been one of the options, but it's been one I think that most of us as fans go, really don't want that. I understand it's got to be closer to the metro, be built closer to the Morgan Boulevard metro, but it ain't the same. It ain't the same as having it back in D.C. Here's what Livero's source tells him. Van Hollen is a much bigger problem than Senator Steve Daines. The veteran Democrats' office issued the following statement. Maryland has served as the proud home of the Commanders for over 20 years. As the team looks to the future, I hope they will choose to stay in Maryland and appreciate the efforts of Governor Moore and others working to make that happen. As discussions continue, the priority is to ensure a fair process in the selection of a site and prevent actions that unfairly tilt the scales in favor of one location over another. Lovero says the fight over the future home of the Commanders is about to get ugly. Like Daines, Van Hollen can stop the D.C. RFK Memorial Stadium Campus Revitalization Act, that's a long one, which could transfer control of the land to the city, even though there would likely be majority support for the legislation, which overwhelmingly passed the House of Representatives in February. Under the Senate protocols, a single piece of legislation like the RFK transfer can be blocked by one senator who can likely prevent a vote from taking place. And if nothing else, this probably holds it up for a year. The Senate is scheduled to go on a lengthy break later this month, come back for a short session in September before the November election. So it's quite likely that this is going to be held up another year. And boy, if it goes to Maryland and if it stays in PG County at FedEx Field, that is not going to go over well. I mean, if you thought that Dan Quinn was kind of this would be worse. This would be much worse than that. While it can be closer to the metro stop, the Morgan Boulevard is about a mile now from FedEx, and the shuttle bus service is spotty. I don't think it can be. From what I've heard, they can make it closer to the Morgan Boulevard, but they can't make it like RFK, where you get off the metro and as soon as you come up from that from the tunnel there or from the escalator, you look up and you see the stadium. I don't think it'll be quite like that. So this is not good for someone I like. They're going to put $75 million into improving the stadium, and maybe that'll make it a decent place to play for a few more years. The lease is up in 2027. Whether they build in the district or not, I would imagine it's going to be extended. I don't think they can get it up that quickly the way things are progressing with this. And Lovero writes, he says he believes that ultimately the team will wind up with a new stadium next to Commanders Field. It is the path of least resistance. The Bills and Tennessee Titans are both building new stadiums next to their existing ones. I would say this. I don't think anybody complained about the location of those two stadiums. I mean, the Bills have been at Rich Stadium forever, back to like the OJ days of the early 70s. And from what I understand, the Titans is a pretty cool place. It's like you can get there from like a water taxi. So I think that's different. I think it's a different situation. I think people who grew up here and remember the glory days of going to RFK, location is a big part of it. And I think, the NFL would like it to happen here as well, from what you hear, what you read. So hopefully, Senator Van Hollen, I like you, but don't hold this up. As a Maryland resident, I want it to be built in the District of Columbia. So we'll see where this goes. Meantime, NBA Finals don't get started until Thursday. And boy, if you'd have said 2 years ago that the Dallas Mavericks would be going into the finals with a happy and now seemingly beloved Kyrie Irving, I would have said, you're out of your mind. But that seems to be the case. Luka Doncic is their best player, but Kyrie Irving is happy to play happy to play Robin this time, as he apparently was not when he was playing with LeBron and they won their championship in Cleveland. So a pleased Kyrie, after Dallas wrapped up the title last Thursday, went on with Scott Van Pelt to talk about where he stands emotionally now as he heads back into the NBA Finals.
If I'm overstepping or overanalyzing, by all means correct me, but I described joy in your game and seeing it. It feels evident. I don't know that it's necessarily felt that way in the last few years. It seems that you have found it with this team this year. Is that an accurate read from afar, just watching on a screen sitting here in our office?
Yeah, joy is definitely a good word you can use. Not overstepping your boundaries. I mean, I've lost some pretty close people to me in the past few years, so it hasn't been easy to find joy in the game of basketball when you have some real life stuff going on. I've dealt with a lot of naysayers, a lot of chaos around my name that is untrue, and I've had to answer that call, and I've had to deal with the criticism as best I can as a man that's leading my family and my tribe. So it's bigger than me. This mission is bigger than just basketball. But when you see me out here expressing myself at a high level, I'm glad that you see that, because I'm representing not only God and my ancestors, but the people who support me all around the world, in that locker room, upper management, people I barely know. I feel their prayers, I hear their prayers, and I'm grateful for it. So, yeah, coming out here, it just feels like being back on the playground again in New Jersey.
But this is the biggest stage there is, Kyrie, and this journey will lead you back to a place that was part of a journey in the past. And it's a lengthy layoff, but you get an opportunity to go against a very talented Boston team. I would let you enjoy this and not ask the question now, but this is our one chance to chat before the finals. So just a first thought of what that represents, an opportunity to play against that team.
Yeah, man, I'm at a place in my life where I don't even consider, those past moments. I was able to unpack them in a healthy way, move forward as a person. I had a rough time there when I was in Boston, again, just dealing with death in my family and dealing with a lot of off-court stuff that I wasn't ready to handle. So now that I'm in a great place to be able to vocalize how I'm feeling, I'm ready to go back into Boston and have fun with my teammates. I know we're going to be locked in, and we're going against a great Boston team that has earned their way to the NBA Finals. So I just see them as a formidable opponent, an honest opponent, and we're going to see the best team that wins.
No doubt. And you're gracious with your time. Luka was so adamant about what you mean to them. And you've seen it, Kyrie. You've lived it. You've been at the top of the basketball mountain.
That's my hermano right there, man.
What's the message to this group? Because they're going to follow your lead. Luka and you together are the super power duo, but they're going to lean into you. What's the message to the group?
Just stay focused, stay poised, and, remember why we play the game of basketball and who we do it for. And don't stress the environment. It's another basketball court that we get a chance to paint on a canvas and enjoy it. It's the finals, but it's still basketball at the end of the day. It's going to be some high-level players going at each other. Grateful to be able to go against, a great coach, great players in Boston. It's going to be a chess match, and I'm looking forward to it. And, just tell my guys to enjoy the moment.
It's Kyrie Irving with Scott Van Pelt after they wrapped up the Western Finals last week, and he's going back into Boston where he is hated. He scorched earth there and then winds up in Brooklyn. That ended badly. When he went to Dallas, I thought Mark Cuban, who at the time was still the majority owner, I thought he was out of his mind bringing this guy in. And, boy, it has worked out. That's the perfect compliment right now to Luka. It's Luka's team, and Luka is the best player on that team. But Kyrie Irving has proved to be a heck of a number two, which is why Tim Legler, in picking this series, the finals, which start Thursday, telling Scott Van Pelt he likes Dallas, and they did this kind of morning TV hot take style.
The best player in this series is who in the NBA Finals?
Luka Doncic. Luka. He's the guy. There's no answer for Luka Doncic. I don't think he's really affected by the personnel you throw at him. And Boston's got plenty of it. They got a lot of versatility there. Luka Doncic controls the game unlike any other player in the NBA.
Whose legacy has the most? All right, wait. I slipped. Forget it. Back to what we do here. I agree with you. Who's Boston put on it?
Jaylen Brown has the best physical profile to guard him. Now, they've got guys. Drew Holiday, obviously. Derek White. I just think when you put smaller type guards, and those guys aren't little by any means, but Luka Doncic is legitimately 6'8". He's as wide as a refrigerator. He hits you with his shoulder in your chest, and air leaves your body because you back up and give ground, and he steps away from you to create separation. Right. Jaylen Brown has the length and the physical brawn that you need to be able to dig in and not give ground, but still have enough size to contest him. Problem with that is Luka is very good at drawing fouls. Do you want Jaylen Brown to pick up 2 fouls in the first 6 minutes of a game because he bites on a couple of head fakes? That's the tough one. The great thing about Boston is, Scott, they've got a lot of different guys that they can throw at him to do an adequate job.
Okay, but Dallas, and hey, great that they're focusing on defense, and all praise to them for being better there, but Boston's got a hell of a lot of options that Dallas is going to have to deal with, and I don't know what direction they go in terms of trying to stop the multiple scoring options that Boston's got.
This is by far the best closeout team at the three-point line that they will have played to this point in the playoffs, and that would have been the same, by the way, if it had been Minnesota that got in. That is what I'm so fascinated by in this series. I have a pretty good feeling what these guys are going to do offensively. The top guys, the top of the food chain guys. I am fascinated to see the impact that Dallas's defense has on Boston, because that is a team that can hit you like a buzzsaw on certain nights. And when they're making a lot of threes, they're almost unguardable. Let's see what this improved Dallas defense has for them, because they've been one of the best in the league for the last 3 months.
Boston can't do that mess around and let a game slip away kind of thing that they did in these early series. And they tried to hand one to Indiana. Indiana just couldn't figure out how to take it. Who do you like to win the series?
I like Dallas. I'm riding right now the way Luka and Kyrie are playing together, and the talent level there. It's on display in the way they can control the game.
Wow. So Boston's been the best team. They got the home court advantage. They may get Kristaps Porzingis back. Today is Monday. I guess we'll find out something either tomorrow or Wednesday. But he does like Dallas to win the series. And, sometimes it's not the better team. It's the team that's playing the best. And right now, Dallas looks really good, because here you had Minnesota up knocking out the defending champs, blowing them out on their home court in Game 7, riding that momentum coming into this. And Dallas was good enough with Luka, who – as Legler says, is the best player in the series. And, I heard this years and years ago from people who covered the league for a long, long time. And they will tell you that in most cases, the team that has the best player wins the championship. I mean, we think of the Bulls, we think of the Jordan Bulls, right? The Lakers, maybe you can make the case that Kareem was still at the top of his game. But when they won their later titles, Magic was the best player. Bird was the best player when Boston won their championships. So the best player in this series is Luka Doncic. That's probably going to give Dallas an advantage here. And even though they don't have home court, but what have we seen? What is home court necessarily meant in all of these series? Didn't mean anything to the Knicks. Didn't mean anything to Denver. It doesn't always work out that way. So it'll be interesting to see it, and then the whole Kyrie narrative takes a whole different. I mean, think about how we were talking about Kyrie when he was liking Instagram posts about a film that had Nazi sympathizers in it and things like that, and just the way he was viewed around the league. Like, I heard people like Michael Wilbon, an NBA guy, say he's the worst teammate in history. Well, now he's not the best in history, but right now he's one of the best in the NBA for the best player. So that sets up a very interesting scenario as we get started on Thursday night in Boston. Meantime, Greg Olsen making the rounds, says about his situation, and boy, this is a ticklish one. We knew it was going to be, but by Tom Brady taking an extra year last year, in other words, not going right from playing to going to the broadcast booth, saying he needed a year off, that raised the profile and the image of Greg Olsen so much that it's a much different feel this year as Brady is finally going to do what he's being paid to do, $37.5 million a year. He is going to be the number one analyst for Fox, and Greg Olsen looks like he's going to have to accept being bumped down to the 2 team because there's no other place for him to go. His thoughts on that and more with Rich Eisen as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, Tony's coming up at 11 o'clock on this Monday, which looks kind of threatening out there. A lot of clouds, but still some sunshine. I think the rain, all that rain we had, sooner or later we got to have a dry spell here, right? I mean, gorgeous weekend. I was up in New York, but I understand it was beautiful here as well, and hopefully we're going to have another pretty good week, maybe some thunderstorms here and there. Stop talking like a weatherman, Andy. Talk about sports. All right. Jeff Passan reporting the Orioles are bringing up infielder Connor Norby, 23 years old, hitting .286 with 9 home runs, 36 runs batted in AAA. So he will be in Toronto tonight as the Orioles begin a series there. They blew a 3-0 lead yesterday. So far, nothing about bullpen. They need bullpen help. That's the big thing. They have fallen 3 games behind the Yankees, who have just been unbelievable. I mean, Juan Soto, just incredible again. Yesterday, I think he hit another home run. He hit a 2-run homer in the 9th inning as the Yankees came from behind to beat the Giants. Their record is 42-19. That is the best record now in baseball, just slightly ahead. They're just slightly ahead of the Phillies. The Phillies 41-19, the Yankees 42-19. Nothing wrong with the Orioles at 37-20. You take that record. But looks like we saw that. I don't want to jump ahead because we saw this last year with Tampa. It looked like Tampa was going to run away with the division. They still got more games to go head to head with them. So that'll be a hell of a series once they meet. But they've got Toronto tonight. That's a last place team, and they need to fatten up to stay within striking distance of the Yankees. 3 games back, and it's only the beginning of June, so don't get too worked up about that. Some football stuff. Greg Olsen, who is celebrated again. He won another Emmy Award as the best analyst in the business, but getting ready to be bumped down to the number 2 team on Fox, thanks to Tom Brady taking the job that he signed up for a couple of years ago. And this was Olsen talking to Rich Eisen on Thursday, I think it was Thursday of last week, about the Kansas City Chiefs, not just their dynasty, but the quarterback tight end dynasty, because Olsen is part of some type of a group called Tight End U. I don't know exactly what they do, but he's like the leader of the tight end guys. Is he a Hall of Fame tight end? Maybe, but he's got Hall of Fame tight ends in his group, and one of them is Travis Kelce, who has teamed up with Patrick Mahomes to win 3 of the last 4 Super Bowls. This is Olsen on what they mean as a duo and what they could potentially mean in NFL history if they add another championship to that trophy case.
They could go down as the best group, and the way I look at it, and the reason that I appreciate it so much is because the style in which they play was like a style that, again, I'm not saying I was Kelce and me and Cam, but like that was Cam and I's kind of style, where you couldn't really draw the line on a piece of paper. The route might look a little bit different each time. Kelce one time will run it at 8 yards, 9 yards, 12 yards. And if you asked him, like, hey, why'd you run your route like that? He'd be like, well, because that's how I could get open. Like, I just run where the defense is not, and Pat trusts me and throws me the ball. Like, that relationship, you can't coach. You can't have all of your tight ends run their routes like that. You can only ask guys who have a really close understanding. They see the game through the same set of eyes as their quarterback. And when that's happening in real time, nothing that Travis is doing is catching Mahomes by surprise, and vice versa. Like, that comes with years, that comes with experience, that comes with spending a lot of time together, talking things through. And it's really hard for defenses to defend it. Like, the way I try to explain it, Rich, is like all week in practice, somebody's wearing an 87 jersey. And it's like, this is Kelce. We need to guard him. We know he's, one of the best guys in the league. And then it comes into the game, and it's like, well, what's no one trying to guard him? Well, yeah, the route on Wednesday's practice that the scout team guy ran on that piece of paper card that the coach held up said, run 14 yards, make a left, and catch a dig route. Well, when Kelce does it, he could run out, in, stop, twirl, and run his route at 9 yards based on whatever the defense is doing, and just get himself open. Like, you can't practice against that. You can't prepare for that. Like, they are literally improvising to a degree on every single route he runs, all within the confines of the concept to not disrupt everybody else's routes. That, I can't stress to you like how special that is, how hard it is to emulate and recreate that. And defenses just have a really hard time defending optionality, right? Just a lot of variance between routes and concepts and end spots. Like, you just can't defend every blade of grass. And they are, of all time, they're in that mix as far as the best that have ever done it. And that's saying a lot.
Yeah, it's Greg Olsen with Rich Eisen, the combo of Kelce and Mahomes. They are attempting to do what no other team has done in the Super Bowl era, and that is to win 3 straight. We've had teams that have knocked on the door, no one has been able to win 3 straight. The Miami Dolphins went to 3 straight. They got clobbered by the Cowboys. Then they beat the Redskins. And then they won their second straight by beating the Minnesota Vikings. But no team has ever won 3 in a row. The obstacles in doing that are, I think, even bigger than they ever have been before, not just the expansion of the schedule, whereas, the Dolphins, they did it in an era of 14 games. Now it's for 16, now 17 games, not to mention the schedule, which gets potskied around with all the time. You could be playing any night of the week, as the Chiefs are this year. So that's part of it. But also the other things that they face in this day and age, as was outlined by Olsen with Rich Eisen.
It seems like every time we leave them for dead, we called it. We've had the pleasure of calling a bunch of their games over the last couple of years, and halfway through the season last year, and the media, the narrative was they're done. They can't block. Their offensive line hasn't come together like they thought. Their offensive weapons, Mahomes cannot carry them. Again with just Travis Kelce. They never should have let Tyreek go 2 years ago. Like all of even though they won the Super Bowl right away,
yes,
like last year, those narratives were starting to creep back. Like you can't just rely on Mahomes to be a magician. He can't do it all himself. And Andy Reid can only create so much. And then as the year went on, they got a little bit better, and then they found their groove. So I think the only thing stopping them is them, right? I think as long as their best players are heavily engaged, which they show no signs of not, continuing to be committed to doing things at a high level, committed to being professionals, committing to being like as long as they got Mahomes and Kelce and Chris Jones and that young defense is off the charts. We can go on a whole segment on just their ability to weather the defensive turnover, win the Super Bowl with all those rookies 2 years ago, and then all those guys in year 2 with Spags, arguably were the best defense in the league, maybe in the top handful. Like, for them to be able to do that so quickly and weather the storm was because of Andy Reid, because they had Mahomes, and he's like the ultimate eraser. So, like, they have things that everyone else doesn't have, so they can kind of weather the ups and the downs. As long as Mahomes is there, as long as Andy Reid is there, as long as Kelce's there, and as long as that defense stays young and active and Spagnuolo's blitzing guys from all over the place, come next year in the AFC, doesn't matter who the fun team is, who the story, when it comes down, until proven otherwise, the AFC goes through Kansas City. And it's going to be that way as long as all those guys are still wearing Chiefs uniforms and obviously still playing at a high level.
What he pointed out there at the end about having the coach and quarterback duo, it highlights what Joe Gibbs was able to do in what was, well, it wasn't a full dynasty, but it tickled a dynasty with what Washington did in the 1980s when they went to 4 Super Bowls, winning 3 of them over a 9-year period with 3 different quarterbacks, none of whom will be in the Hall of Fame. I really don't think you can emphasize that enough. And what Olsen is pointing out about the Chiefs, the huge advantage that they have is they have that guy at quarterback and that guy at coach. And if you have that, and you have other good pieces around you, other Hall of Fame type players, and a good depth, you got a chance. But it's still tougher than it's ever been. And here he is outlining just how tough it is with the way the NFL runs in 2024.
The fact that they have had the success that they've had, right? When you talk about, especially in recent years, right, the Patriots, the Chiefs, like in this era of football, when these teams put on this prolonged period of success,
yes,
they are doing it in spite of every single rule and every single institution of the NFL. They are doing it in spite of everything that's in place, right? You are not supposed to win for a long period of time because you're supposed to lose all your good players to free agency. You're not supposed to keep your coordinators because they're going to get head coaches, because the more success you have, the more attrition your coaching staff has. The better you are, you play all the division winners from the previous year in your division, in your out of division games. So you play a harder schedule. You play more playoff teams, right? Like you get the lower draft picks. I mean, across the board, everything in the NFL is designed for the really successful teams to fall back to the middle, and for the really bad teams to climb themselves up and just put everybody in that middle tier. So for them to continue to overcome all of those processes put in place and just continue to win in spite of turnover at the offensive weapons every single year, mostly at wideout. In spite of 2 years ago when they won the Super Bowl against Philly, doing it with like 7 rookie starters on defense, who then, oh my God, in year 2, these guys are flat out stars, and their defense is now carrying the team while the offense kind of found their way there in the middle of the season when they were struggling. Like, they are able to weather things that most teams cannot because they have continuity at the most important spots, head coach and quarterback. When those two spots are stable, consistent, and obviously elite at what they do, you have a lot more freedom and flexibility to struggle on offense because the defense can pick you up, and struggle on defense and break in some new guys. Like, not every team has the ability to weather those storms. That's why you see teams good and then fall off the face of the earth. And then a team that was bad have a real flash in the pan, make a run to the playoffs, and then the next year they fall out. Like, the NFL is designed for that. So the fact that the Chiefs can continue to weather all these obstacles, storylines, primetime games every week, different days, different schedules during, is only because of the people we've talked about this whole interview. And that's the advantage that they have that's inherent that the other teams don't have.
Yeah, and if they win again, if they are the first to three-peat, then you start talking about the greatest teams ever. The Cowboys, 3 of 4 prior to free agency, right? Because free agency didn't come in until 93. They won the third Super Bowl that year. The Super Bowls that they won were after the 91 and the 92 and the 93 seasons, and after the 94 seasons, 95. So, free agency was coming in, but it was different. They're doing this in the free agent era. The Green Bay Packers, they won 5 in 7 years. No free agency then. The best coach in Vince Lombardi, et cetera, et cetera. The 49ers with what they did, the 4 that they won with Montana, the 5 overall, it would include Steve Young. I mean, you really have to be talking about them as perhaps, not just the greatest individual season team, which I guess you're always going to have to give the nod to the undefeated Dolphins, since nobody's done that and nobody's going undefeated again, not with a 17-game schedule. But you would also have to look at them in the totality of this period of time, the Mahomes-Reed era, and say, maybe they've taken their place at number. Long way to go. We're in early June. Where we are in February is going to tell the story. But they got to be in the discussion because of all of what Olsen has outlined there. Last thing from Olsen, and this is, nobody has to hold a benefit for him. He's going to be fine, and eventually he'll make his way up to a number 1 team, whether it turns out that Brady finds that this announcing thing isn't really for him. Maybe he's the replacement for Chris Collinsworth on Sunday Night Football. Maybe, although I don't think this would be quite as big, but maybe being the Amazon number 1 guy is it, and that could possibly happen. Maybe when they make a change with Al Michaels, maybe they bring in a new team and it's Olsen. But he's going down to the minors essentially. I mean, it's not the minor leagues, but it's not the penthouse, and he's been in the penthouse and he has succeeded. He won a second straight Emmy for his work on Fox. Did a great job in the Super Bowl. Everybody's patting him on the back for that. And now he's got to go work with the number 2 team. And here's how he explained where he is mentally with Rich Eisen last week.
My excitement to go call games with Joe Davis and Pam Oliver and Pete and Artie in the truck and our entire crew, like, this is a world-class crew. Like, on paper, obviously every headline is Olsen's demoted, Olsen loses. Like, on paper, I don't care about any of that. Like, this is a world-class NFL production crew. They've been doing this for way longer than I've been doing it. They've been doing this longer than before I was even in the NFL at all. Right? So, like, I don't look at this as like I'm going to an inferior crew. It is. That couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
That's one element of this. And I've had great conversations with them, making plans for the season. Then the other element of that is completely separate from everything. You want to call Super Bowls. You want to be on the A crew. You want to be A crew, top crew, whatever the hell we call it. You want to call Super Bowls. I want to call NFC championships with 60 million people. I want to call Super Bowls with 112 million people. I want those spotlight games. I want to present the only game on television. You're tuning in, and my voice, our crew's voice, is laying out how this game's going to unfold, the scenarios, the possibilities, the trends. Hey, here's how they're going to come in. What are the adjustments? Like, unpacking a live NFL game is about as fun. I mean, firsthand, it's about as fun as it gets, right? The unpredictability and the excitement and the thinking on the fly and having to do it in a relatively seamless way to present to the country. I've really enjoyed that challenge. So, yes, do I want to call Super Bowls? 100%. Am I content just being a part of the show? And I've said this before, like, I'm not just happy to be a part. Am I thankful for my job? Yes. Am I thankful to be with an amazing crew this year? Of course. This has nothing to do with them. My aspirations have never changed. Just because now that I've done it for the last 2 years and called the top game, my aspirations are even more clear. Like, I want to call top games. I want to call Super Bowls. I want to call the game where the entire country tunes in. Like, no different than as a player. Those are the ones you live for. Those are the ones that you want that pressure. You want that magnifying glass. You want Twitter going bananas, hopefully good, if not, not disaster. But, like, I love that. Like, that's what you strive for. And I'm committed to that path now more than ever. I understand the situation that I'm in. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm thrilled and I'm like doing jumping jacks over it, but I'm a grown man. Like, I understand what I signed up for. I understand the world that we live in, and some things don't necessarily always go your way, but I'm confident that if I can just keep doing what I've been doing, I have a great crew to do it with who continue to make me look better than I am. Can I get back there one day? I absolutely. And when that is, where that is, on what time frame, who knows? But I'm more committed to making that a reality now than at any point in my early career of doing this.
Yeah, it's got to be a tough situation, but I think that's probably the only way you can approach it because, again, there's nowhere to go. Now, also realize this. Realize how he got to the number one team. This was also an unusual set of circumstances. Joe Buck and Troy Aikman had worked together for something like 20 years together on Fox. And, it's Madden Summerall. That group stays together. But ESPN, which had fired a whole bunch of people, paid ridiculous money to bring them both over to ESPN. So now you've got Fox going, oh, what are we going to do? Well, we'll eventually name Brady as the analyst, but we're going to go with these guys for now. And Greg Olsen, he was good copy when he was a player, good talker, and he's done some stuff with Fox. He was in the studio. We're going to make him the number one analyst. So he got an opportunity which was kind of unusual. Like when you lose a heavy hitter like Troy Aikman, it would seem like you want to replace him right away with somebody of similar stature. They didn't do that. So Olsen was always kind of a placeholder. Maybe what Fox didn't count on was he would be this good and this celebrated as a placeholder. And now he's got to take a step back for someone who's never called a game before. But he's Tom Brady. And you gotta see. Now, from what I've heard of these interviews, because Brady's been making the rounds with these kind of interviews as well, Olsen's better. He's better right now. Will Brady be better at the middle or end of next season? Yeah, probably. Will he be better than Olsen? I don't know. But just because his name is Tom Brady, he's going to command more attention. And for what, they tell you about the TV numbers, he's not going to bring any more eyeballs to the set. He's not really going to bring any more money in advertising. It's just the prestige of that. And Fox being willing to pay that kind of money, $37.5 million a year to a guy to do 20 football games, it is what it is. And Olsen has to be prepared to live with that. So I think he's probably listened to some good advice. Just keep grinding away as one who's been demoted before, obviously different levels of broadcasting. That's the best way to do it. Just show up for work, do the best job you can every day, and that seems like the way Olsen is going to go. Tony is coming up next. I'll be back here tomorrow at 11 a.m.